Hey, my friend, and welcome to Aligned to Rise, the podcast for ambitious women who are ready to rise above their symptoms, release old limitations, and fully rise into their true power and potential. I'm your host, Alyssa Chavez, functional nutritionist, performance coach, and former endo and infertility warrior who knows what it's like to feel held back by your body and your beliefs. I've taken a journey of true healing from the inside out so that I can show up feeling great in my body, confident and unstoppable. And now I'm here to help you do the same. Through a blend of functional nutrition and deep mindset work, this show will empower you to reclaim your vitality, trust your intuition, and live unapologetically in your purpose. If you're ready to align your body, mind, and spirit so you can rise to your highest potential, you're in the right place. Let's rise, my friend. This show was created for educational purposes only and should not be used as a replacement for medical advice or treatment. Hey, my friend, and welcome back to the podcast. I wanted to take a moment to introduce today's guest. Her name is Lauren Enright. Her and I connected recently, and I just absolutely adore her and the work that she does. I think the work she does is so incredibly powerful, and I just really enjoy her as a human being. Her and I have had some wonderful chats, and she's just somebody that I felt like all of you would really love to get to know as well. So I knew I had to have her on the podcast. So Lauren is a mind-body fertility coach. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner. She also teaches fertility yoga. She's a mindfulness and meditation expert. She is a behavioral breathwork guide, a birth doula with an academic background in neuroscience and education and over a decade of experience. So many wonderful modalities that she's working in that I know she's going to share with you in today's episode. And she's also the creator of the Fully Fertile Method, which is a mind-body program, which has helped folks from all over the world heal from trauma, process unresolved emotions, transform limiting beliefs, and develop a resilient nervous system so they can get and stay pregnant despite age, past failures, medical diagnoses, and recurrent loss. And after birthing and parenting 2 children of her own and experiencing the deep healing that motherhood can bring, it is now Lauren's mission to help folks break cycles of intergenerational trauma by educating, empowering, and supporting them at all stages of their journey. So, that's Lauren's story here, and I just know that you're going to absolutely love hearing from her today. I had so much fun with this interview and so much fun just getting to know her as a person. Like I said, she's just a wonderful individual. I know you all are going to love her, and so with that, I'm going to let Lauren take it away. All right, Lauren. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast. And I know everything you talk about is just so fantastic and such a wonderful topic for the audience to hear. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Alyssa.
Absolutely. So I would love if we can start out just by sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do and just what led you into doing what you're doing.
All right. Yeah. So I wear many hats. I'm a woman of many hats. And one of those hats is mind-body fertility coach. And before I got to wear the mind-body fertility coach hat, and a hat that I still wear today is birth doula. Also yoga teacher. So I teach fertility yoga. I teach prenatal yoga. I teach mom and baby yoga. I teach mindfulness, I teach meditation, I teach breath work, and a new addition to my certifications and trainings is I am currently being trained as a somatic experiencing practitioner, a modality that I have been a product of in terms of my own transformations in my life. And so it's a modality that I'm really passionate about.
Awesome. I love that so much. And I'm excited to dive into many of the things that you do. I just think it's so cool that you blend all of that together in different ways. So,
I'm a learner. I love, so before I got into this work, this is actually a career change. So before all of this, in another lifetime, I was a high school science teacher.
oh, wow.
And before that, I was studying neuroscience. And so I also have a master's degree in neuroscience. I used to do research. And so I'd say the common thread through all of the things that I've done in my life of like, I am a very curious creature. I love to learn, I love to study, and I love to teach. And so I would say today I still remain a teacher in all the hats that I wear. It's just the content is a little bit different, and of
Mm.
course the audience is a little bit different.
Yeah, I love that. That's probably why you and I get along so well because I'm totally the same way. And I feel like, once I learn one thing, then it just leads to another. There's a whole rabbit hole of things to learn and, I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes life a little bit more fun, right?
Yeah.
We just can always have something to learn. We never get bored.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, I feel like there's so much to cover here today, but let's start off with this because we were actually talking about this just before we started our interview today. We were just chatting a little bit beforehand because, as many of you know, if you've been listening to the podcast or following me for any length of time, I'm currently, at least at the time we're recording this, hopefully still once it's released, am currently expecting a baby girl, and it's been quite a journey to get here. This was not easy to get pregnant or stay pregnant. Like just all of the things were hard for me along the journey. And one thing that we were just chatting about was the fear that can come along with that. And I know that's something that you like to speak to is the fear, I think both with the fertility journey itself, just the kind of the fear of what's going to unfold on the fertility journey, but also even in cases like mine of just that fear that can come up once you are actually pregnant, if you've experienced losses before or challenges with pregnancies, there's so many different things that can come up with that. So I would love if you can just touch on that a little bit, just what can come up for people, what you've seen with clients that you work with, and maybe even starting to dig into some of the tools that you use to help people to overcome some of that fear.
Yeah, so I like to see the whole journey. Like often if we're in a fertility space, we use the word fertility journey. Then there is the pregnancy journey once we get to the other side of the fertility journey. And then there is the postpartum journey or the parenting journey once we get to the other side of birth. And so, what I like to, like the perspective through which I like to see fears is that I'd say people can have either conscious or very often unconscious fear. Those are a little bit harder, but I really like to help support my clients in discovering what their unconscious fears are. And those fears can be related to like the preconception, so the trying to conceive part of this whole motherhood journey, parenting journey. People can have conscious or unconscious fears around the being pregnant part of the journey. They could have fears around the giving birth part of the journey. And they can also even have fears related to the whole becoming a mother, like this
Mm-hmm.
profound shift that happens in mind and body and spirit and identity. There's so many changes that happen along the journey. And I'd say a lot of the fears that people have are often rooted in kind of that change, fear around the
Yeah,
change.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So many different areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone were to come to you then and say I love by the way that you're talking about both the fear that we're aware of, but also the fear that can be happening maybe underneath the surface that is lingering there, but maybe you haven't even uncovered yet. So, what are some of the tools that you use to help people who are struggling with that fear anywhere along that journey? Because, like you said, it can really happen anywhere or everywhere along that
Yeah.
that journey.
So part of what I also like to help my clients do is just simplify and demystify a lot of the things that we might hear about in the places where we consume our information and our content.
Mm.
And while I'd say there's a lot of amazing content out there, I'd say then there's also things that might seem mystical or they might seem confusing. And so I feel like when it comes to this idea of like subconscious fears and things that we might not even necessarily consciously know, I feel like that can seem a bit mysterious. And so what I like to offer is that it doesn't have to be mysterious, and that I like to actually really empower the women that I get to work with to be like, no, like I would argue that most people actually do know what their unconscious fears are. It's just that
Mhm.
they don't actually think it's a fear or they don't actually
Yeah,
think it's a problem. And
right.
so I'd say like the place that I start is just by asking people like, well, what are some of the things that you worry about? Right. And so sometimes it like a unconscious fear actually could just kind of disguise itself as like a little nagging worry that kind of is on replay in our mind, and that it's just like this kind of what if, like this bad thing, right? It's often like a what if, like a bad thing happening in the future, right? And it's just like on replay. And maybe it's on replay so much so that we kind of don't even realize that it's there.
Yeah.
I like to, through coaching, through mindfulness practices, through deepening people's like awareness, just helping them uncover some of these nagging worries so they actually see it as this isn't actually just like a silly worry. This is actually kind of the root fear.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And I love how you're kind of digging in and exploring that too. Just, what kinds of things are coming up for you? What are those worries that are keeping you up at night? Because it's true. I mean, probably so many people have these thoughts that maybe they're just kind of shoving to the back of their mind or trying to kind of stomp it down and ignore it. I know that's definitely something I did for a long time of just, yeah, we're just gonna kind of push that aside and, just put a smile on, pretend everything is great. But there's so many different little things that can come up. So I love that you're helping people with that.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned even some of the newer work that you're doing, the somatic type work, which I love. I'm a huge fan of somatic type work, and I know you're also doing breath work and yoga and just all these different modalities. So I think maybe starting out, we can even chat a little bit for anyone who's not really familiar. What does somatic work really look like? What is that? What does that
Yeah.
even mean? And
Yeah.
how can that be a powerful tool on your journey?
Yeah. So somatic means the body. And so that term soma means referring to the body. And so when we do somatic work, it's a modality through which we can be doing mindset work. We can be working with like the thoughts in the mind. It's a modality through which we can be doing emotional work, so working to process emotions. It is a modality through which we can do trauma resolution work, so working with trauma. And the idea is that the experiences of our lives, which might be, small traumatic, like a small T trauma or a larger T trauma, experiences of our lives that are very uncomfortable emotionally, even thoughts that we have, kind of again, those on repeat, that they create these imprints in the body, and that they're essentially held and stored in the body. And so, if we are working to resolve these only through cognition and logic and speaking and the mind, that we are kind of overriding or ignoring a really important part of the story, which is that these emotions and these thoughts and this trauma is actually stored in the body. And so one way that I really like to help people understand it is I would call it a bottom up approach to working again with trauma and with emotions rather than a top down. So bottom up meaning body first. So rather than using language and reasoning and cognition to work with the trauma or the emotion, we're using the body.
I love that. So when you say using the body, what does that what does that entail? What does that
Yeah.
actually look
Yeah,
like?
yeah. I think it's really helpful if I use a super tangible example. And so I'm
Perfect.
going to literally just think about the session that I did with a man, actually. I also work with men, and that's been a really fun
Awesome.
part of my practice that I've started to do this somatic experiencing work with men, but couples. So I'm like working with couples who are
Yeah.
struggling with fertility. And so we were talking about in our session today, one-on-one session, about some of the things that he's experiencing in his life right now that is hard. So when
Hmm.
we were going over like what is feeling hard right now, it was in part related to the fact that his wife had experienced a loss. There was also something going on. There was just, I don't need to go into maybe all of the details of it, but it was like, you know, all of these different things that were happening in his life, his mother with breast cancer, going through dementia, it was really hard, right? So when I asked him you know, what emotion are you experiencing right now? When you're telling me the story, right? So this is where when we're doing somatic work, it does involve dialogue and we tell stories, but then those stories are like clues to now like be like, okay, so what is the emotion that is tied to this story? So he came up with, well, it's like it's loss. It's like the grief that I'm holding for my mother not, you know, having her cognition the way it used to be. And so from that piece, then now we go into the body. So it's like, okay, so you're experiencing grief because of something that's happening with your mother. So where do you feel that grief? What are you noticing in your body right now? Where do you feel that grief in your body? And so often when it comes to sadness and grief, for a lot of humans, right, we feel it in our neck. So we can, this is why like when we go to like talk about something that's really challenging and difficult, we might notice that your voice starts to get a little bit
Mm.
like caught, right? And so when we, it's kind of the same thing when we're a little bit nervous, right? Like we all know and have that experience of hearing how our voice changes when we feel nervous.
Yeah.
Right? When we have to go talk, like public speaking, right? So similarly, when we feel an emotion that's an uncomfortable emotion, we might experience that as like a tightness in the neck. And so when I help people uncover like what they're feeling in their body when they're experiencing an emotion, the idea is that then we want to like make space for it and kind of there's a whole process of like tracking the felt sense in the body. And the idea is that when we do this, that actually helps us digest the charge of the emotion, which kind of liberates us from it, rather than it staying stuck and stored and creating kind of more grief.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's something that I know has been super powerful for me to have more awareness of is just that that mind body connection, right? Which I know is just a huge part of the work that you do. And the way that I often will explain it to people too, that I think everybody can really relate to and understand is even just say you're feeling nervous about something coming up, anxious about, like you said, a public speaking coming up, or maybe you have to have a hard conversation with somebody or whatever it is. We've all had that sensation in your belly even where you feel, that maybe that tightness or gosh, I can't even eat right now because there's that just kind of tight, stuck feeling.
Hmm.
Sometimes people will even experience changes in bowel movements. Some people experience. I know this may be a TMI kind of thing, but hey, that's okay. I in my practice I talk
Yeah.
about poop all the time. This is like totally normal for me. But some people even experience like that constipation or the opposite, having to run to the bathroom when they're feeling stressed. So I think we've all experienced that to an extent. But what you're talking about is just really being aware of what emotions are coming up within a certain situation that you're talking about, a certain, large or small trauma that is happening in your life or maybe has happened in the past, and bringing an awareness to where and how that's showing up in your body. And I think that's just so powerful to have an awareness of that because I know so often, and this was definitely the case for me for many years, I would have aches and pains and different things in my body, or for me, even just the intense pain that I experienced with endometriosis, things like that. And just not really connect that with, emotions or anything else. And for me anyway, when I started to have an awareness of that, hey, there's there's actually a connection between these emotions that I experience and what I'm feeling physically in my body, it was such a powerful revelation just to understand that and be able to see that connection.
Amazing. Yeah. There were so many things you just said there that I was like, oh yes. I wanted to. But yeah, absolutely. But it is, I'd say, the one line that I always offer my clients is, you can't change what you're not aware of. And
Yeah.
so that's why when we have that moment of awareness, I like to call it like the light bulb moment, like the aha, eureka moment, that is the beginning of the transformation
Yeah.
because we have that newfound like awareness. And so what that does is again it's empowering because like now with that awareness it means okay, what am I going to do with this new knowledge? What am I going to do
Mm-hmm.
about it now? Like it actually, and so many of and you can hear even in my voice like the excitement
Yeah, I love it.
and the passion because it's just that so many of the women that I work with, what they want so much, like, when they're struggling to get pregnant is they don't like the lack of certainty or the lack of control. Like this is often so much what we crave is we crave certainty, we crave control. And so I do like to help empower my clients to have these aha moments where they then see that they do have control over what they're going to do about this new
Yeah.
awareness that they have. Like now that I know that there is an emotional link that is tied to the discomfort I feel in my body, which is maybe tied to my endometriosis, like
Mm-hmm.
now what do I do about that? And we
Mm-hmm.
can and we can do things about that very simply. I mean, and it's never to say that it's going to be easy. Or like to undermine people's, pain in that way. But I do again like to try to shift the perspective of, but maybe it actually doesn't have to be as hard as you think. Like so much of I'm thinking right now of a client that I had that had stage 4 endometriosis. And actually, a lot of my clients that I work with endometriosis, like it's almost become like we let our diagnoses define us. And they end
Yes.
up becoming defined by their diagnosis of like, and it's almost like we wear it with pride. Like I see this from my
Mm-hmm.
clients of like, I have stage 4 endo. And then we let that kind of make so much meaning out of what that means, right? Like
Yep.
we let it define us, and then that creates what's possible for us. And so we might not think that it actually could be possible to shift it with something like just working with emotional awareness of what emotions am I carrying in my body. But if we start to open up to this being a possibility, then I'd say that's like a miracle moment, because now we start to see that maybe actually we don't have to be defined by this diagnosis and maybe we can
Yes.
still get pregnant in whatever way we really want to, like maybe even naturally. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a client that I'm thinking of with the stage 4 endo. Like I worked with her this summer and she quite literally when we first started working together was like, never in her mind would she believe that she could get pregnant naturally after all of the diagnoses and she's currently pregnant now naturally.
Oh,
Right?
nice.
Like, so and sometimes that's like where that shift happens in the mind, it just literally opens up this whole new world of possibility.
Absolutely. And that story that you were sharing sounds so very similar to my journey because I feel like for a lot of years I was really focused on supporting my physical body, which I definitely think was helpful. I mean, I definitely had a lot of changes happen through those years, through all the work I was doing through nutrition and lifestyle supports and supplements and a lot of these things that I still support clients with to this day because I'm a big believer that it can be a little bit of everything, right? It's
Absolutely. No,
this
absolutely.
there's complexity to it, of course, but definitely for me because my fertility journey at the end of the day was 8 going on 9 years, and I'd been through multiple rounds of IVF and, same thing, was told I would never be able to conceive naturally by multiple doctors. And so it can be challenging, I think, just to overcome that belief that's instilled in you. And
Yeah.
exactly what you were saying, I very much felt like I was identifying as, I'm an endo warrior. I also had stage 4 endo, and just there's just a lot that's tied in with that, especially when you're out there in the lovely world of the internet and hearing other conversations people are having and everything. It's so easy to just fall into that bubble of just identifying as like, this is just who I am. I have this lifelong disease that doesn't have a cure and all these things. And you know, what really helped me along the way is exactly what you're talking about. Starting to recognize that I'm a whole human being in and of it myself. I didn't need, it's not me and endo in this one bubble. Like they actually can be separate things. I am this person and I happen to have this diagnosis, but I just kind of made a decision of, this is no longer going to
Mm.
completely take over and rule my life. And
Yeah. I think I
just,
just want to highlight
yeah,
that right there,
please
that
do.
pivotal moment of I just made a decision.
Yes.
And again, that is simple,
Hmm.
right? And this is what I'm saying is I like to empower people to believe that it can be simple. And again, that's not to undermine the pain and the struggle and the grief and everything that comes with the journey. But I do really think that sometimes there can almost be, I don't know if I would want to call it like an addiction, but we get wrapped up in the hard. And that becomes part of the identity too. And so it's hard to believe that something could just be simple when there's been so much hard.
Yeah.
But I would say that at some point there is, and so many of the women I work with, this like pivotal moment where they just make a decision,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
from that point forward that really things start to change when they just choose, make a choice. And it's hard to make choices because
Hmm.
of fear, right? Like
Right.
that brings us back to the beginning of our conversation of
Yeah.
like, what if I, think of like even a conversation I was having with someone this morning, and I know working with her can help her, and people will often come back to me and tell me like, well, I have to think about it.
Mm.
And then I think we get so caught up in the thinking about it. And why do we have to think of, and even that in itself, like rather than feeling with our body, we think about it with our mind. And then that's where like these little sneaky sabotaging thoughts come in,
Yeah.
right? To keep us in the
Yep.
status quo when we're just like thinking about it. So it's
Yeah.
like, what does the body have to say? And this comes back to the
Mm.
somatic approach of learning the language of our body because our body does communicate to us.
Yeah.
But if we're so caught up in our heads and thoughts and thinking all the time, and we're more disconnected from our body, in the way of like, how does our body, I'd say like sometimes when we have diagnoses, we're connected to our body in one way
Yeah.
because of the diagnosis and the pain in the body. But it's like, again, it's what are we making the diagnosis and the pain mean? And,
Yes.
can we start to create a new relationship with our body?
Mm. So beautiful. Yeah, I love the way that you're approaching that, because I think that's so common, and so much of that I think just comes from society and just what we see around us, what we're taught. Because in the traditional medical system, which you know God bless the traditional medical system for what it has to offer. I mean, there are so many things that
Absolutely.
can be
Absolutely.
life-saving. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I think there's also a tendency to lean towards, hey, I've got this thing going on in my body. Oh, hey, here's a pill to basically cover up that symptom.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, moving on. Awesome. Which I feel like can potentially take away from our abilities to really tap in and tune into what's truly happening in your body. Because I know, even speaking on a fairly basic level for me, I used to, when I was younger, I'd have period pain, for example. And what would I do? I would take some Advil or some Midol, and I would just get on with the rest of my day, basically just kind of numbing things out
Yeah.
and get on with whatever I had to do, and just not really essentially trying to not pay attention to what was happening in my body.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
such a different experience when you learn to really, exactly what you said, to listen to what your body is telling you, what your body has to say. And that really
Hmm.
comes back again to that whole mind body connection, which is a
Hmm.
two-way street. And maybe you can even speak to that a little bit more, since that's really the area that you specialize in. So for somebody who, maybe is struggling with fertility issues, and or because it so often goes hand in hand, having issues
Yeah.
with cycles and all the
Yeah.
things that can
Yeah.
connect with that. What does that really mean to you? Like, how would you explain that to somebody who maybe is just not familiar with that mind body connection and how that all works? What does that really look like, and how does that impact the way that we do feel on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So I feel like I want to start here, and this will hopefully answer the question because I think it's an example that I've had in my mind since you were talking about endometriosis and the mind-body connection, and you had asked me about, tools that I offer my clients to help them. And so, and it relates also to what you were talking about in terms of the discomfort and the pain, from the women's health issue, let's say just of having a painful period.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking of a client again, how I helped her with her endometriosis pain and using the mind-body connection. So something that I like to do, the language of the body, and this also ties into learning the language of the body. Because I think something that is disempowering sometimes is when we tell people, well, just listen to your body. And what I would say is that not many of us know how to actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is that the way we go about listening to our body was we create stories and we create meaning, out of what the symptoms that we are experiencing, what they mean, right? And it is also like medical professionals who will then tell us, like, you're experiencing this, so it means, this. Okay, so part of using this mind-body approach is being open to the perspective that, well, maybe the symptom that I've been experiencing in my body doesn't necessarily, mean that I am like in pain, let's say. Like, and I know that sounds crazy to think, but it's like literally we have to like repattern and rewire the mind-body
Yeah.
connection because we just make these interpretations over our life of the symptom I'm feeling means this. So that's how we start, is by being open. So when it comes to like working with like a sensation like coming, like pain coming from whatever it might be, let's say endometriosis, I like to have my clients imagine what that pain looks like as if it were like a metaphor or an image or sometimes like a cartoon character. Okay, I'm trying to make it. Okay, and so sometimes when people talk to me about their endometriosis pain, they'll say like, "Oh, like I'm picturing," or it could also be like one of the elements, like I'm picturing fire, or I'm picturing like an emoji, like the angry emoji. Okay. And so I'm like, okay, great. So that's like this visual representation in our mind of a sensation that we're feeling in the body. Okay. And so that's like the starting point. So now to go or like to go about repatterning or rewiring or reframing, like all the re words, okay, we have to say like, well, what would you like instead? Like instead of like this like pain that might be that you might describe as like a knife or like fire inside of you, like what would you like to move towards instead? And we like might say like, oh, I would love for it to be watery. I would love for it to be calm. I would love for it to be expansive and spacious. So then, I mean, those are my words. Those are probably not
Yeah.
words that somebody might come up with right away, but it would be like we can always kind of know the opposite. Like if your, cart representation of your endometriosis is like an emoji that is like fire and like an angry emoji, then what would you like instead? Like, oh, I would like it to be like water or like I don't know, just like a smiley face instead, right? So then we have to start to picture in our mind, we have to use the power of the mind to visualize, to now when we start to feel that sensation and we think of that sensation being like fire, an angry face, we have to go into our mind and instead picture, let's say, the element water, or picture a happy face, or picture the representation of what we want, like the embodiment of the sensation that we want to be. And then what happens is the body doesn't know the difference between something that's imagined and something that is real.
Yeah.
So if we can in that moment start to imagine like the different sensation that we would like to experience, that starts to then rewire and repattern it so that we end up experiencing the sensation that we're imagining. If that makes sense. I
Yes.
hope that made sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to really highlight what you said there because I think that is such a key piece of this is understanding how our minds work and that your mind literally does not know the difference.
Your
If
body.
your
Yeah.
body, sorry, your
Yeah,
body
it's
does
okay.
not
You
know the
know the
difference
difference.
between, something that's actually happening right there in front of you and something that is imagined. And I think that is so incredibly powerful to be aware of because when it comes to that mind body connection, a big part of it is shifting those thoughts, those pictures, those images, those, I would even say the expectations that you have in your mind. And if you can really
Yes.
visualize what you want, oh gosh, it can just
Yeah.
change so much.
And that's often the starting point. Like you said, the expectation. And I'd say that's what often limits people and my clients from, and that's what I help them with, is getting realistic expectations of what this process and what this change looks like over time.
Mhm.
Because when we often think things need to happen, they should be happening faster. Right? We have
Right.
false expectations in terms of timelines, in terms
Yeah.
of what it actually looks like, in terms of what it actually feels like to experience change.
Yeah.
And then that false expectation is what prevents us from actually being able to change. Because we
Hmm.
then, through the brain's negativity bias, we then
Right.
just see that, oh, we haven't experienced the change, the transformation, we have failed, and therefore we stop trying.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. It just, I find all of this so fascinating. Just it's something I really find myself wanting to explore more and more that connection between our minds and our bodies. Because I feel like so many people, and definitely I include myself in this, former self anyway, of
Yeah.
just thinking of them as being separate things. I have my brain, I have my body. My brain happens to live inside of my body, but not really understanding the connection between the two. And I think when you do, it can just, move
Yeah.
move mountains.
I think it comes from a little bit of a, like, there's a subtle distinction between the brain and the mind.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we get this idea, this kind of
Yes.
dichotomous idea of like the brain, because if we think of the organ,
Right.
the brain resides in the head and sends messages down to the body. And so we see it really as such, like top down. But really, what I teach, and this really comes from probably a lot of different traditions, but especially in yoga, is that your mind actually lives in the whole physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And from the model of yoga, it's actually called the pancha koshas, the five sheaths. We actually say that mano maya kosha is the mind sheath. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
actually this idea of that the mind permeates the whole body and it doesn't just reside in the brain, in the head.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So very true. Thank you for clarifying that distinction. I think that's
Yeah.
so good to have an awareness of. Now, one thing I know that we had chatted about previously that I really loved and would love to for you to share a little bit about here as well is you were talking about because you use all these different modalities in your practice, yoga and meditation and breath work and now bringing in the somatic experiencing so many beautiful things. But one thing that you were talking to me about previously was just the idea that for many people we have these practices. I know a lot
Mm.
of my audience is already maybe doing some of that, maybe taking yoga classes or starting a meditation practice, but it almost becomes this separate piece where, okay, I'm going to spend this hour doing yoga and then I'm going to get on with the rest of my day and do the other things. But what you were talking about is really learning to incorporate those practices into just everyday life. And I think that is just one of the pieces that's probably missing for a lot of people. So I would love if you can just share a little bit about what that looks like. Again, if you had a client in front of you and you were kind of coaching them on how to do that, how to use these tools in everyday life. And I'm sure there's quite a range of that depending on who it is and what's going on and all of the things. But I would love if you can share a little bit about that and just what that can look like for people.
Yeah. So absolutely, it is something that I always say, start where you are. So if you're a listener and you've never done yoga or you've never tried a breathing exercise, you've never tried meditating, start where you are. I think it is great to do a 30-minute class once a week. It's great to do a 30-minute class once a day. I'd say like there's no, like proper amount that you need to do in order to have these tools to be effective. So always start where you are is the first part. And when you do start, or if you're like somebody who is, doing all of like practicing these different techniques, maybe you can see yourself in that a little bit of, when I show up to my practice, it's kind of like checking off a box on my to-do list. And I do see that happens with a lot of people of like, I'm going to go to a class and like check I've done it, or I'm going to go to a class and kind of just use it as this opportunity to like fully kind of check out of my body and, have this and a teacher guide me. And while, I mean, that can sometimes feel nice, what I would also say is that's a little bit disempowering because if we just show up to the class, have the teacher guide us, leave, and then we go on to the rest of our day, then we're not really using the practices to really help us create change in our day to day.
Yeah.
Those are a few things I'd start with. I'd say probably, and a line that we have often in yoga, or at least that I was taught in my yoga teacher trainings, is, what you practice on your mat, the whole idea of practicing on our mat is to take those practices then off our mat.
Right.
Right. So I think that's also, again, like a really like important intention through which to come to practice
Mhm.
is like, I'm not practicing because I think I should, or because I think it's like literally, this is training for me so that when I practice these tools on a regular basis, I'm going to be then more easily able to integrate them into the moments of my life when I need them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the moments in our life, and I'm thinking of, let's say right now, what's coming to mind is you were talking about how in early pregnancy, after loss, it can be very triggering and very challenging, of course, because we have fear around having another loss. And there's so many fears that come up. And I'm thinking of one of my clients in particular who experienced a loss at 20 weeks. And so that was a profound, and loss is always loss,
Yeah.
but that was definitely really hard for her. And so we worked together to heal the pain and grief. I have a program called Healing Pain and Grief After Pregnancy Loss, and we worked together, mind body program, 4 weeks. And then from there, we went into my Fertile from Within program, did another 2 months together. She was able to get pregnant again and
Mm.
maintain that pregnancy by the end of the 3 months. She's currently probably about 20 weeks pregnant now. And so that
Mm.
was really hard too, right? Getting to that point
Yeah.
where you've had your previous loss. And in any case, all this to say that, a tool that she really, really has been using throughout to help her, especially when she goes for her scans, because she's been going for
Yeah.
check-ins at the hospital to do ultrasounds to make sure everything's okay. And what she would find really early in her pregnancy was just by sitting in the waiting room, that it was really triggering for her, just
Yeah.
sitting in the waiting room.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. And so this is exactly what I'm talking about of, okay, so when you're sitting in the waiting room and when it's a moment where you're noticing that your nervous system's activated, you feel triggered, you feel the fear coming up, that is the moment where we need to anchor into our body, where we need to, if we can take our hands to our body, like take our hands to our body in a way that maybe doesn't seem weird if we're in like in, in a waiting room. Sometimes people are worried about that. Like, what are other people going to think of me in this
Yeah.
moment? But you could just take your hands to your belly in that
Mhm.
moment and like maybe close your eyes, right? That's not like that doesn't have to be weird to close your eyes in a waiting room, right? And just focus on your breath. And just, and again, if we have an audio to follow, that can be great, a recording. And I like to just, the more we practice doing this, the more you become equipped to be able to do this all on your own. You feel empowered. So
Yeah.
just sit there with your hands on your belly to close your eyes and to take a breath and say, I'm safe.
Mm.
I'm safe in this moment. And so those are things that I'd say we practice in yoga. We practice when we're doing meditation. We practice when we're doing breath work. We practice using our breath to signal to our nervous system that we're safe in this moment. We help being anchored in our body. And by like, and this is a way to really help like with the fear response that is getting triggered
Yeah.
in the body. Well, I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there can be many little moments like that that can show up differently for different people. But I think having tools in your tool belt that you can lean on when those emotions are coming up, when those triggers are coming up, I think is so powerful, so necessary during
Yeah.
that journey. Yeah.
But those are the things that we do. And I know all people, all yoga teachers teach a little bit differently. I'd say in the style of yoga that I teach, which is a very body-based, like all yoga is mind body. And if you're doing something that's a little bit more of a like I don't know, vinyasa practice that is very like much like rooted in, which again, nothing wrong with that, but there might not be as much of emphasis on like what is happening in my mind right now. What are the words that I'm saying to myself? And in the yoga practices that I teach, I actually like to incorporate these types of affirmations into the yoga so that
Mm,
we start to learn to like bring awareness to what's going on in my mind as I'm practicing yoga. Like, am I in the present moment as I'm, because we can, like, we all know, like, or maybe not everybody if you haven't done yoga, but like you could be doing your yoga class thinking about your to-do list for when you're done the class.
right.
Right? Or you could be doing your yoga class like super anchored in your body and
Yeah.
focusing on your breath. So that's how the yoga helps you stay in your body so that when you go into your day and you notice yourself going into the future and getting all caught up in kind of the what ifs and the spiral of like what's going to happen later, or you get caught up in the spirals of what happened before, you notice that and then you say, oh, whoa, I'm not in the present moment right now. I need to come back to the
Yeah.
present moment. I can do that through anchoring myself in my body and in my breath.
Beautiful. Perfect. Well, Lauren, we've covered so much today.
I didn't even
I
realize, I looked at the time and I'm like, oh my God, is it time to wrap up already again?
I did the same thing. I was like, "Oh wow, I feel like I could probably just talk to you for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time as well. I'm
Thank
so
you.
appreciative of you being here and just sharing everything that you've learned along the way. I know people are going to want to connect with you and reach out to you after listening to this episode. So, why don't you just share with us, and we'll link to this in the show notes as well, of course, but why don't you just share with us where the best places to connect with you are, and if you have any sort of offerings that you'd like to share with people.
Yeah, so I really like to connect with people in their preferred ways to connect. So if you are on Instagram, my Instagram profile is at fertile from within, because it all comes from within. And I also have a website. My website is breathewithlauren.com. And on my website, I have all of my services and my programs because I also offer yoga teacher trainings for in the prenatal, postnatal. Not that we talked about that here, but I have all of my birth doula work. That's all on my website. And yeah, I also have I developed a toolkit because this is what we want, right? We want
Yeah.
tools. We want mind body tools. So I have my mind body fertility toolkit. And in the toolkit, it's a little mini course and it's free. And when you sign up for my mind body fertility toolkit, it gives you a little bit of a sample of these different tools. Yeah, so just you can try them out for yourself.
Fantastic. And we will be sure to link to that in the show notes so you guys can go and check that out and try some of these tools for yourself. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you, Alyssa. This has been so great. I love this style of interview. It felt really organic and natural. Thank you.
Great. Good. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here and share with us. I absolutely love the work that you do, and I'm so happy that we have connected. And it's just been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast here.
Mm.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for being here today, and we'll talk soon. Much love. Thank you so much for tuning in to Aligned to Rise. If this episode spoke to you, take a moment to share it with a friend who needs this message too. And then don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'll see you next time, my friend. Let's rise together.